Citadel, a quest within a wizard's tower. This is a fairly obscure game. I don't know how many of you had heard of it before seeing my video. It's an old game from 1976, but it's not too hard to find. I'm interested in this game because these days, as you may know if you watch some of my recent videos, I'm interested in trying to reconstruct the history of board gaming in the late 70s and to discover in particular the influence that board gaming received for role-playing games, and in particular from Dungeons & Dragons. Dungeons & Dragons emerged from board games. It was an outgrowth, you can say, of wargaming in particular, when wargamers decided to start playing with individual characters to keep their characters over a campaign instead of just playing one-shot adventures, to customize their characters, to see them grow, etc., etc., etc. When role-playing games came out of wargaming, and then immediately that had an effect on board games that tried to capture the innovations that role-playing games, in particular Dungeons & Dragons, had created. Citadel, to me, is an important, if now obscure, game in this process of showing how board games benefited from Dungeons & Dragons, because it has been clearly inspired by Dungeons & Dragons for reasons that you will see. It is a game that tries to capture the idea of controlling individual heroes, sending them into a dungeon, in any case, into an hostile environment where they have to navigate through rooms and hallways and fighting monsters to retrieve, in this case, a particular item. The heroes are trying to retrieve that talisman, which is a talisman that is represented by that token there. And the evil player that controls the wizard's forces will prepare the dungeon, will prepare the play area, and set up traps and monsters before the game starts. Clearly fantasy game inspired by Dungeons & Dragons, and I will say something, there is something that today may not be intuitive to show how this game is close to the original Dungeons & Dragons. The original Dungeons & Dragons had a strong wargame feel to it. They still had it, which is normal because wargame is precisely where Dungeons & Dragons originated. If you look at later editions of Dungeons & Dragons, it is more about the role, about the character, about the medicination and the immersion. But the first edition of D&D really was, in a sense, a free-form, it was still a free-form miniature game. It still felt like a modified war game where you could do more stuff that you could otherwise, that you could before, and where you controlled individuals. And you will see that this game has a very strong miniature feel to it, including the fact that it doesn't have all of the game pieces that you need to play. You need to provide them, and in this game you need miniatures. You need to provide your own miniatures. We'll talk about that in a second. So what you get with Citadel, if you decide to hunt down a copy, which again is not too hard, and it's not super crazy expensive, what you get is the rulebook, which is a good quality, much better than some of the amatorial DTP products from that time that I've seen. The art in particular is particularly pleasant, is above average. It is also much better than the art of the first edition of Dungeons & Dragons. Let's face it, if you've seen that art, it's not that great. So, good art. So you get a rulebook, most of which in reality is a description of the type of miniatures that you should use. It is a rulebook that pays a lot of attention to miniatures. It is, in a sense, again, it's a miniature game, really. It is a miniature game, more structured than D&D, a little less structured than traditional war games. What you get is also 6 maps on thick cardstock, and these maps are numbered from 1 to 6, and they're double-sided, so you can choose which side you want to use. So you have a total of 12 maps, and in each game you will only use 6 of them. So that gives you a good freedom when it comes to configuring the dungeon, the citadel of the wizard that the heroes are raiding and that the wizard player is trying to defend. Now, this is a semi-modular board game. To me, as far as I know, this may be the first of this kind, the first that tries to give you not just the same board every time, but to give you options about organizing the board and creating different types of terrain. And again, that captures the idea that the game is not simply going back to the same abstract board every time. It is exploring a space in a world that theoretically exists in the fiction of the game. And so you should be able to alter it, to some extent. The wizard should be able to build the tower or the dungeon any way the wizard wants. So, semi-modular, because you still don't have exactly, like you have in later games, the ability of drawing tiles from a stack or building a complex dungeon. You still only have 6 maps. As you can see, they look like they're sealed. They don't have direct connections. The way you connect them, the way the evil wizard player connects them before the game starts, is to these tokens that have these numbers here, and that represent entry and exit points. You can think of them as staircases, secret passages, but in truth, you should think of them as teleporting areas, because you may connect the areas of the dungeon to one another in various ways. Each section of the dungeon of the Citadel needs to have 2 entry points and 2 exit points. So you should be able to go to all places. No air should be fully sealed, but the evil player may set up things in such a way that the good player, the hero's player, will have to jump around quite a while before getting to the area where the talisman is hidden. So before the game starts, the Citadel player selects the areas that will be played, that will be used, that is the side of the maps that will be used. Then the evil player places on the board these things here to indicate the direction that the connections work. For example, if I place this here in the area number 1, that means that right there I have a staircase or a secret passage or a teleporting area that brings me from where I am to map number 2. And in map number 2, I place this as a token, which pretty much is the corresponding, is the exit point of that entry point that shows me that this is where you pop out on this map when you're coming from 1. And so you can connect things in different ways. For example, here I can have another teleporting point that leads me to 5. And then in map number 5, which would be one of these, depending on the side I'm using, I'll simply place a token somewhere on the map that indicates where it is that you're coming when you're showing up, that you're coming up when you're coming from 1. So you connect things this way, and then you'll put them face down so that the opponent doesn't know exactly which doors or teleporting passages lead where, and also that the opponent, the hero's player, doesn't know exactly what they are, because you also have other pieces that have similar backs that you will put there. For example, you have pitfalls, and you can put pitfalls there, and you also have monsters. Now, here's when it comes to miniature games. The evil player sets up first, creates the roster of their monsters first, and there are 3 categories of monsters: humans, near humans, such as orcs or goblins, and non-humans. That can be anything and everything from the famous oozes and the amoebas of D&D to dragons, werewolves, and chimeras, any sort of monster that you can think of. It really does not matter. What happens is that you have a number of combat points that you can assign to your creatures. I have 250 combat points, for example. I decide to have 5 near humans, and I'm going to give them 20 points each, and that I'm going to think of them as 5 goblins. Or I decide to have 3 near humans that have 20 combat points, and those are pretty weak, so I think of them, or 25 points, I think of them as goblins. And then I have other 3 near humans that have 40 combat points each. They are stronger, so I think of them as orcs. So basically, you create your roster, which pretty much will revolve around the miniatures that you have. Maybe you will buy miniatures specifically to have them, or frankly, you can just write down a roster. But the point is that the monsters, near monsters, humans are only characterized or only defined by their combat abilities. Well, being near humans or humans has some slight different effects, especially when it comes to movement, but frankly, if you're a near human and if you have 25 points or 40 points, that is all that matters. You can call yourself an orc or a goblin. You can have a goblin that has 50 points, is a goblin on steroid, or you can have a goblin that has 20, or an orc that has 25 points. Heck, you could have a giant that has 25 points. It's the smallest giant in the world. So all that matters really is that characters are defined by their being humans, non-human, or monsters, and the number of points that you have. Everything else is chrome that you add for your own pleasure, for your own enjoyment, but that has no effect whatsoever in the game. There are no spells in the game, there are no special weapons in the game, there are no range attacks, all combat is melee. So really, all that you're doing is to assign numbers to individual units. So the evil player does that first and creates a roster. So on a sheet of paper, you write, for example, I have a monster that is worth 35 points, and I write on my sheet of paper what that monster is. For example, it's a dragon. But I don't have to. I could just write monster 35. Who cares? And I put that down somewhere on the board. Then I want to have two near humans, and one is 35 and one is 40. And I record on my sheet of paper what they are and what they do. And then I want to have some humans. This one is an assassin. This one is a barbarian. This one is a Viking. This one is a Valkyrie. And this one is the reincarnation of Ned Stark. I don't care. I can call them whatever I want because it doesn't matter at all. Again, only the numbers matter. Once, and then during the game, when the good player comes around and discovers them, you flip them face up, then you look in at the roster, you replace them with the miniatures. And again, frankly, you don't even have to. You could just use these tokens here, which are completely flavorless, of course, no chrome, no theme whatsoever, but you could. Game-wise, there is no difference between this and a miniature that looks very good, replaces it, and then you have a sheet of paper that says that the miniature corresponds to a human with 25 points. The evil player creates their roster, and then the good player creates a similar roster with the same amount of points, distributing the points among different types of figures, different types of humans, and again, it doesn't matter. You can call them clerics, druids, you can call them whatever you want. They don't have spells, they don't have range attacks. They all have melee attacks, and all that they do is that they attack with different amounts of combat points. That's all that matters. So the good player too also creates a roster with individual heroes, and there are no such counters to represent the heroes. I guess you could use the humans here, if you have some left. The humans, by the way, as you can see, the humans and near humans, they look good, this runic type of thing, but human and N for near human and H for human is not very easy to tell apart. So you could use some of those tokens, but there aren't enough really to have enough monsters and creatures for the bad guy and the good guy. So do you make further counters, or again, you use your own miniatures. Then the good guy party enters from the entry exit point, and the game starts. The player moves any and all of his heroes. Heroes move by up to 5 squares, and you cannot move diagonally. Now you think, can I move here? I don't know. The game doesn't say anything about this terrain. You can think of it as merely cosmetic and you only care about the walls, even though actually there are no indications that you should care about the walls. So you can think of it as merely cosmetic, or you can add chrome effects, ways in which terrain and other furniture things will affect movement and or combat. It's completely up to you. Again, you can see the miniature idea here, that the game is presented as a board game, but it really is a sandbox, just like miniature rules usually. Sets of miniature rules are. So the good guy moves around the dungeon, moves their heroes. If they move adjacent to one of these face-down tokens, the hero announces the intention of exploring that square, of looking under it, but the good guy needs to go through, to move all of the people before any of these can be revealed. The idea is that you need to complete your movement before you reveal and see which ones of these may be traps and monsters, so you cannot then move in the same turn with knowledge that you received the same turn. Monsters do have a zone of control, so if you're adjacent to them you cannot move further, but only after they have been activated. So the monsters are revealed, they are replaced with their miniature, you have your miniature there. And then the good guy can, the heroes, or the good guy player can attack adjacent monsters. Now, combat is actually quite interesting because it is super simple, but it has a couple of interesting tactical wrinkles. Now, let's assume that those two pieces do represent the human is a hero and the other thing, the M, is a monster. And let's suppose that they are fighting against each other. The attacker adds the combat factor of the opponent to a base number of 60. There's always 60. In this case, we go to 95. Then the attacker subtracts his own combat value. In this case, we have 25. So we go down to 70. Then you roll a percentile die, or percentile dice, that is 2d10s. One of them you read as the tens, one is the units. That generates a number between 1 and 100. And you compare it with the number that you just obtained. By adding that number, subtracting the number to 60, you obtain the target number. If your percentile die result was lower than the target number, nothing happens. If you exceeded the target number by 1 to 20, then you inflicted a wound on the opponent. If you exceeded the target number by something between 21 and 40, then you give 2 points of damage, 41 to 60, 3 points of damage, and so on and so forth. And so that is simple and neat, so that the target number will be over 60 if you are weaker than the opponent, lower than 60 if you are stronger than the opponent, and so on and so forth. What is interesting is that, and I talked about tactical wrinkles, is that you could choose, for example, to attack at 150% of your strength and then defend with 0, or defend with 150 and attack with 0. This is important because I said that you do this thing when you're attacking, but in truth, simultaneously, and I kept this for later so that I wouldn't bring you too much information at once, simultaneously the opponent is doing the same. So as you do the calculation with the target number, you roll your percentile, the opponent also does the same. So combat is simultaneous. In this case, this monster adds 25 to 60, subtracts 35, and then rolls a percentile die against the resulting target number. So it's simultaneous, but again, players, before resolving that, they can choose to act defensively, in which case they defend at 150% of their value, but attack with 0, which doesn't mean you can't attack at all. It means that you will have a hard time because you don't get to add anything to the, or better, to subtract anything from the target number. You may also attack a lot, very, very fiercely, so you attack at 150, but you defend at 0. Again, it doesn't mean you'll get hit automatically, it simply means that you don't get to add anything to the base number when the opponent is attacking you. So both players attack each other, they inflict wounds, and that's it. Another interesting wrinkle is that you may have to fight against multiple opponents. Suppose that these two enemies are attacking this guy here. Then you may split, and this guy would be really in big trouble. And then you get to split your own numerical value between the two in any way you want. Maybe you want to give all 25 against one and 0 against the other, or you want to split it in different ways. And I like that. It's a simple way to simulate the fact that you may concentrate against a single enemy, divide your attention, things like that. What the game is lacking entirely, however, at least I couldn't find any reference in the rule, is to figure out how many wound points people have, how many wounds it takes to kill an opponent. It simply says you inflict the wounds and that's it, but it doesn't say where those wounds should be subtracted from. I hope it doesn't mean the combat values, because in that case, a simple fight, it says fights can last several turns. But if I'm going to inflict 0, 1, or 2 wounds in most cases, a fight between these two guys is going to last for like 20 turns, 18, 15 turns. I mean, who wants to play that? The dull rolling of dice over and over again. And given that the game doesn't have any other game effects, no spells, range attacks, all that you do is to choose, in some cases, how much you want to give to an attack and to defense, or to split your attack and defense value, and then you roll. All you do is move and roll an attack. The game can become, in my humble opinion, pretty dull if you have to play it for 15 turns for each darn session of combat. I think, and I haven't played the game actually, I read the rules for historical interest, I'm sharing some ideas with you, but this is the point that got me stumped, and I thought, I'm not gonna waste time on this point. I don't think it's playable this way. The game omits it to tell you how the wound system works. A way that I can think of, but I would need to test it, would be to assign each character a number of 1 points equal to their combat value divided by 10, and then you could choose if you want to round it up or down. So 25 would be 2 or 3 1 points, 35 3 or 4, depending on how you want to do it. But you have to tweak it a little bit to experiment, and the rules don't really tell you what to do. They spend too much time telling you exactly how you should paint the clothes of the kind of heroes that you want. Depending on the type of flavor that you want to bring to the game. Yes, because flavor theme really need to come for a big part from the miniatures, because the game doesn't have much of that. In any case, you need to choose how you want to resolve combat. I haven't figured out a way of that, how that can be done, to assign wounds and decide who dies and who doesn't die. The heroes do not have to enter the dungeon all at the same time. They may enter in different waves, but the end condition remains the same. If at some point one of the heroes finds the talisman and manages to get it out of the Citadel, the heroes win the game, so the player controlling the heroes wins the game. Otherwise, it is the wizard, the player, the evil player that wins if he manages to destroy, to slaughter all of the heroes before they can complete their mission of retrieving the magic talisman. So this is Citadel. In a sense, visionary. In a sense, you may say, a very interesting product of its own times. You can really see how it comes from an age where role-playing games and the idea of exploring, being a hero in a fantasy world, having this idea of progressive revelation, of discovering new things as you go, had just started. And it was really in its infancy and was fascinating, and people were really taken by it. It's a great idea. We still love it to this day. But you can also see still how there are naive ideas, how the idea hasn't matured entirely, hasn't really blossomed in a way that then would be mirrored in interesting mechanics, in a lot of chrome, in game effects. It still feels too much like a war game, and not one of the most interesting ones. War games do have a lot of chromes, do have a lot of interesting rules and mechanics to give you historical detail when you're playing historical ones, and also to give you tactical options, to give you a lot of reasons for interest that exceeded your moving and attacking. It is only people that do not play war games that think that war games are move and attack and that's it. Oh, there's so much to it. Unfortunately, Citadel is almost like a war game designed by somebody who thinks in that terms. That was a stereotypical idea of war games. I think that moving and attacking and rolling dice and wounding the opponent for 3 hours is gonna get my players so excited they're gonna love it. I don't think they are. And again, maybe you play the game and you love it. After looking at the components, reading the rules, giving it some time, moving the pieces around, seeing the loopholes that I do not know how to close, I'm not particularly interested in playing the game. I'm interested and I'm happy that I learned about it because I think it is an interesting piece of history. It is an attempt to move from a fixed board to a modular board. Again, that also is not done completely. It's an attempt to tell individual stories It is an attempt to give you interesting individuals, but it is an attempt that still feels very rudimentary. It is very rudimentary by contemporary times. So on one hand, it's like we are right to treat it a little bit paternalistically from a 2016 perspective, to look at it, oh, look what people did in the infancy of the hobby, in the infancy of the dungeon crawl genre. So it is, or it is okay, it is correct, but we also, I think, need to keep an historical perspective and acknowledge this is still a noble failure. It is a noble attempt to get where we are now. We wouldn't have exciting and fun games such as Temple of Elemental Evil, Legends of Drizzt, Shadows of Brimstone, and these very good dungeon crawlers if somebody hadn't messed up a little bit, if somebody hadn't attempted to go past. And maybe somebody did play this game and thought, I see the potential, and added and changed something, and then we had a slightly better dungeon crawler, and so on and so forth. We do not need to read the mind of all the designers that ever existed. We do not need to find the diaries that connect all games to one another. So a diary of a designer says, I played Citadel and I created this game, and another designer says, I played that game and I added this or that. We don't need to reconstruct all single passages. We don't need to find fossils for all the transitional forms. When we look at the big pictures, we see that in 1974 D&D came out and invented the idea of bringing a good, strong story to board gaming. And in the years that came after that, other designers tried to improve on that idea and to recast the idea into a board game experience. Not all results were good, and Citadel is one that seemed a little bland. This seems a little too straightforward and not very thematically engaging, and it has that mechanical problem of not explaining how wounds are resolved. But if it is a failure, again, it's a noble one, and it is an historically interesting one. And frankly, if you were to put some work and effort in it, to retweak it, to playtest it, to add rules and chromes, to use the sandbox to build your own sandcastle, then actually it may even end up being an interesting game. But I think you would have to put quite a bit of work in it for the game to be up to the standards of fun and exciting dungeon crawlers like the ones that we have these days.